Good afternoon. We're going to get started with the final panel of the day. And I know everyone's tired. I had to get a coffee. I hope everyone got one. But I think a lot of what we're feeling right now is a lot of love and also a lot of information, right? And with information comes a bit of responsibility. And so these panels are meant to provide information for folks interested in food systems here in the Rio Grande Valley and beyond. And so we have our final panel of the day is around this recent award that was given out by the USDA. And it's actually a theme that we want to talk about is how can we leverage resources to best help those who need it most. And there are a lot of federal programs out there. There are a lot of federal personnel here. And, you know, what we're trying to do is start lines of communication and start them early. Now, we'll start here with just some introductions. We have a few questions that we have for the panelists. And again, what we have here are a panel of experts who have some information, and we want to share that information with you, the public, and you, the concerned citizens, so that you can also get engaged and get some of your questions answered around this theme. So the theme of this is really stacking resources for maximum benefit. How can we leverage the financial capital, the institutional capital, and the human capital, and the social capital that we have in this room? I'll point out once again just how amazing it was to be in this room where you have so many different people asking some of the same questions. Now, the questions today are going to be focused a little bit on that specific program. It's called the Regional Food Business Centers Program. And we actually had a conversation about this last year that we're gonna also remind you guys about that conversation. But first, I'd like to just start off with some brief introductions. We have Kate Fitzgerald with the USDA. Thank you for coming from Washington, D.C. We have Sue Beckwith, who's with the Texas Center for Local Food. She also is part of the Delta Regional Food Business Centers program. And we have Valerie Venencia, who's with Texas A&M AgriLife, and she's helping manage the Rio Grande Colonias Regional Food Business Center. Just to get everyone up to speed, you know, there was an opportunity to invest in certain communities across the country, and they actually identified some of those communities, the Rio Grande Colonias, the Colonias region being one of them, but others like the Delta of southeastern U.S., Appalachia, tribal areas across the country, and the USDA gave out 12 of these awards. Is that right? 12 of these awards all across the country, and we have 2 of those awards that impact us here in Texas. So we have those program managers here. Now, in particular, this one we're going to focus on is also the one focused on the Rio Grande Colonias project, because as we have heard in previous panels and on tours, we have a high concentration of colonias here in the RGV. So I'm going to start off by, we also have Tanya Chavez. Perdón. Yes. No. It's been a long, long day. And Tanya, I mean, I know you've got so many things going on, and I don't have an excuse. But actually, we saved the best for last. Tanya Chavez is a good friend and a passionate leader with La Unión de Pueblo Entero. And you saw her constituencies were here today in full force. And we want to continue to hear from Tanya. Tanya, you were here last year, right? And we had this conversation last year. But since we have this broad audience, we want to first start off with asking you, what are colonias? And what are some of the pressing needs of colonias when it comes to certain food challenges, food access, opportunities around business and employment in food?
Well, what are colonias? The colonias are unincorporated neighborhoods. Usually they are beyond the city limits. You might actually live in a colonia and you don't even know it. Why? Because all of the colonia have a city address. However, if you call 911, you don't get the police. You get the sheriff's department. EMS gets lost because your street name does not have names. You still are not showing up on Google or iMaps. The colonias are developments that took place because a lot of agricultural farming wasn't happening anymore on those lots, and the county government gave permission to developers to plot the land with bare minimum requirements. Many of them didn't have drainage, didn't have septic tanks, they don't have pay roads, street lights. In some instances, in the 80s, they didn't have basic running water. We have been able to change some of that in what today we call model subdivision rules. And now they have to have some implementation of access to lighting, street light, pay roads, and street names. They also have to have septic tanks. Septic tanks. What is the minimum requirement? Can you imagine? When the most of you might actually live in a city with drainage infrastructure, right? And then we wonder why Hidalgo County and the Rio Grande Valley floods. And that is because we're allowing developments like Colonias to still take place where we are not improving the quality of life of Colonia residents throughout the Rio Grande Valley. So when we talk about access to food, in order to get to the closest Walmart or H-E-B, you have to drive miles. At least where I live, which is south of Alamo, I had to drive at least 10 minutes. And God forbid I'm running out of gas because, well, I'm in trouble then. When we talk about access to jobs, people have to drive into the city because colonias are outside the city limits. And we need to understand that Colonia residents are also part of the community. They're also the students that go to the school districts. They're also the students that go to the colleges and universities that we have in the Rio Grande Valley. And so why are we treating them as second-class citizens by not giving them the same quality of access to programs and services as everybody else in the city does? And so those are the things that we need to keep in mind when we talk about food access. Many of the times, yes, we create programs that are going to create more access to food, but they're far away from when they can easily reach it. We don't even have public transportation in South Texas. Not readily available. I was trying to get my mom from point A to point B, and I could not figure out what the connectivity between Valley Metro and McAllen Metro was. And so I ended up getting her a lift. And her dream was to get on public transportation. And these are the things that Colonia residents have to live with every single day. In Hidalgo County, we have to have a vehicle. Otherwise, we cannot get anywhere. And God forbid the family that only has access to one vehicle because they need to go drop the child, and they need to go to work, and that kid needs to stay at the university or at the after-school program all day long until mom and dad are out of school. And so those are the things when we think about food, access to food, we also have to be thinking about where are the children getting the food? Because if they're staying all day long at the school, are they getting food in the after-school program? How are we making food for college students more affordable at the university? And then because we are one of the most obese, most incidence of most diabetes in the Rio Grande Valley, but also the most poor region in the entire United States, how are we making healthy food affordable and accessible? Everybody talked about today Well, you gotta drive a little farther away because it's worth it, because you're getting access to healthy food. Yes, and Colonia residents don't have that luxury. And so how do we make it equitable and accessible for folks living in the colonias?
Well, and the reason why we asked that question, as you know, is that the Colonias region, which is a federally designated federal designation, the Colonias region was singled out in this call for proposals. Now, Kate, we were here exactly 1 year ago, last year, and at that time, the program was still open, and we had similar discussions, and you were there with La Semilla, with Brownsville Wellness Coalition. For the audience, can you just tell us a little bit about the the Regional Food Business Centers program, what it is, what are the goals of the program, how did you guys get the input as you decided these were the areas, the target, and where the program is in general?
Of course, yeah, I'd be glad to, and thanks for having me back a year later. Where to begin? So the regional food business centers are one piece of what this administration is. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, put it a little
Put it
closer. Please, yeah.
I really do have to do the Mick Jagger thing. Jeez. A larger suite of programs that are designed to look at the food system holistically and try to make it more accessible, more accountable, fair, competitive, equitable, and create opportunities for small and mid-sized farmers and rural communities. So think back 3 years ago, we were in the height of COVID, and what became immediately obvious was the food system that we had then was just too brittle. It didn't work. Overnight, farmers lost access to their markets. Consumers, all consumers, lost access to food. Grocery store shelves were simply empty because the supply chain broke down completely because it was just too concentrated. And what came into stark relief was the communities that weathered this best were the ones in which there were rural or regional food systems, local small and mid-sized producers that had connections to local grocery stores, to local schools, to local food banks, to food pantries, who were able to pivot quickly, and maybe they were no longer selling to a university because the university sent all the students home, but were able to bring their food immediately to a local pantry, food bank, or school for distribution. So getting to the question of where did the ideas come from, honestly, the ideas came from communities, farm communities, rural communities, urban communities, schools, stakeholder groups, producers, at that time saying something has to be done now. This model isn't working. We need to respond. This kind of crisis is not going to go away. We won't, let's hope, have another COVID, but wars. Ukraine, we see all the time how conflict in other parts of the world disrupt our supply chain. Climate. In South Texas, you live it every day in very real and cruel ways. Freezes, excessive heat. So the ideas came from stakeholder groups, honestly. There were listening sessions all over the country by various members of the administration. My boss, the Undersecretary for Marketing and Regulatory Programs, had virtual coffee hours with groups in different regions around the country. There were online listening sessions, and the department put out formal requests for information. Maybe that's not so user-friendly, but we are a federal agency, and what we do is formally ask. We realize there's this problem, this problem, this problem. What ideas do you, all of our stakeholders, have for remedying it? So the input came in, and the response was that there needed to be a mechanism that tied together or knit together all the different kinds of resources that USDA has in our normal course of business, as well as the new resources that came in to respond to COVID, and make them understandable and accessible at the community level. So that was the idea. The regional food business centers were designed to be, or are designed to be, a partnership with USDA and trusted organizations at the local level who know what their communities need, know the USDA programs, and can be a sort of front door access point. They'll provide training, technical assistance, market making, finding the new high-value markets that these producers can sell into, opportunities, workplace opportunities in the food system for Colonias residents, and grant making. So that was the vision then. Just about a year ago, May 12th, I think, the 12 centers were announced. And so now, a year later, it's exciting. They're getting to work.
That's perfect. That leads us to our next question. As I mentioned to you, there were, as Kate mentioned, there was 12 of these, and we actually have 2 of them in Texas. Sue Beckwith with the Texas Center for Local Foods is part of the Delta's Regional Food Business Center, and Valerie out of Texas A&M helps run the Rio Grande Colonias Regional Food Business Center. I was hoping that you can both brief us as to your specific program and how you guys came up with the goals of that program. Who are you talking to about that as you put together these ideas, and who is continuing to help guide you as you roll out your program 1 year later, right? So I'll start with you, Valerie, and then we'll go to Sue.
Hello. So last fall, I joined my awesome team over here. Sorry, I'm a little nervous. I didn't think I was going to be, but anyhow, no, we have 5 key partners. La Semilla is one of them, and glad they were able to join us here. We have People Fund CDFI, who will be handling our Business Builder sub-awards and all the distribution of the
CDFI.
funds.
Can you tell who CDFI
Oh,
is?
CDFI, a Community Development Financial Institution. They provide funds to what we would call non-traditional lenders or borrowers, and we've partnered with them in the past on a healthy food financing initiative, and they were incredible with providing guidance to small businesses. We also have Feeding Texas, who we believe will be helping with some of the distribution to different markets, and also provide access to the small to medium-sized businesses, the infrastructure that they have. A lot of food banks have a lot of cold storage, fleets for moving food throughout the country. We're partnering with Desert Spoon Food Hub, who will also provide some of our coverage for the New Mexico part of our jurisdiction. And it's been an incredible experience. I've only been on the project for 6 months, but we have a really brilliant steering committee who helps guide all the decisions that are being made. And at our retreat this past fall, we ironed out all of our priorities, which obviously are the Colonias communities throughout the southern border of Texas and New Mexico. The Southwest Regional Food Business Center is taking care of California and Arizona's Colonias. And we're, whether the food is being produced in a colonia or outside of a colonia and being brought into a colonia, those are our top priorities.
Okay. How about you, Sue?
Hi, I'm Sue Beckwith. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah. Put it closer to you.
Closer?
That's good.
Okay, I have a little hard of hearing, so when you speak, just speak up.
That's great.
Okay. I'm Sue Beckwith. I work for the Texas Center for Local Food, and our work is focused on helping make sure that farmers earn a decent living from farming so they're still here feeding our communities next year. That's really the core of what we do at TCLF. And we are a small part of the Delta Regional Food Business Center, which is 5 states, Mississippi. And I want to just introduce Rock and Danita, who are here. Leadership of the Delta RFBC are here in the Valley with us. Happy to have you. And I just want our fabulous TCLF team to raise your hands because you're really the backbone of this work. Yeah. So the Delta Regional Food Business Center is 5 states. It's all of Mississippi, all of Louisiana, all of Alabama, most of Arkansas, and some of Texas. We're still working out what our area of responsibility is in Texas, but generally it's going to be central East Texas. So sort of that middle part, if you know where Waco is, kind of Waco, and then maybe Austin, San Marcos over toward Houston, kind of in that area. Good coverage for the Brazos Valley, where we have a lot of black farmers and a lot of aspiring farmers. You know, we're looking for places where we have healthy soil and what else? Water, right? Where can we grow food? So our goal is pretty much as kind of came from AMS as a part of the transformation of the food systems work. And the goal of the regional food business centers is to create robust supply chains that feed our communities healthy, locally grown food. So it's to support agriculture. Again, that farm gate out, right? So I want to be clear about that, because where we have to partner and where we are partnering is with the production folks who can help with the production TA to make sure that supply happens, right? So that's our goal. These are, for us, you know, I could speak for us here in Eastern Texas. We're looking for values-aligned businesses, farm and food businesses, that align with our values of community, health, equity, environmental sustainability, and economy. Keep that money, keep that food in our regional economies as much as we possibly can. So we're looking for, and we'll be making grants to businesses in our geographic area that support those values and contribute to the robust supply chain within our region. Does that make sense?
Perfect.
So that's our goal.
Thank you. Well, so, you know, the awards are rolled out. You guys have the money, I hope. We work with the federal government. We know sometimes it takes time. I wanted to ask you, Valerie, you know, you've heard Tanya's definition of a colonia, right? And this is an important voice because someone who works closely with colonias and colonial residents and other colonial organizations, their definition is the definition of a colonia. I'm curious about your program, the Rio Grande Colonias Regional Food Business Center. How does a program define a colonia? And what does that definition mean in terms of the eligibility to be able to receive that money that you're intending to reach out to?
So we're in the middle of identifying all of our key terms and definitions and what they mean for our region. In El Paso, our colonias communities are very similar to what Tanya described here in the valley. Lack of resources, lack of infrastructure, lack of transportation, and so on and so forth. And as far as eligibility, that's also something that we're working through on for the Business Builder program. And we're really targeting the small to medium-sized businesses. If they're not within a colonia, they have to at least be providing services or distributing within those communities. Not that a business from another part of the state wouldn't be eligible, but if there's not some sort of connection that can be easily identified, then that's not going to be a top priority. Does that?
Yeah, I mean, because I think last year we talked about the difficulties of defining who's in, who's out. I mean, if you look at the map by Housing and Urban Development, they're the ones who actually designate what a colonia is in the federal government, right? They have their federal definition. And the most recent map I saw was just a dot on a map, right? And so then you had two dots right next to each other, one on one street, go around the corner, here's another dot here. But so I think I know that there are organizations and there are at different levels that are trying to build a shape and saying, okay, no, actually this is a colonia and this is not. And it's hard to understand where that jurisdiction is. And I'm curious, like, what's guiding you guys? Like, let me just ask a follow-up question. What's guiding your team to be able to say, okay, we're going to work with these eligible entities, and unfortunately, these won't be privy to that, or is there a specific designation?
Like geographically?
Yeah, or in terms of eligibility.
Say that again.
Or just
I wonder if I could jump in, because I think correct, that it's absolutely correct that USDA articulated 4 priority areas: the Southeast, Delta, Colonias, and then Indian country, which is obviously not regional. Which means that every center has to prioritize work in the high priority areas. So for example, Sue and the folks from Mississippi and Alabama are concentrating specifically on counties. I think that you're looking at counties, right, with particularly high persistent poverty counties, which fundamentally is all of South Texas. The centers still have to serve the whole state. They are not allowed to preclude activities, but they have to prioritize building opportunities, businesses, infrastructure in the high-need communities. So I think you have to look at the border region. If you go back to the HUD map, there are dots on it, but there's also that whole shaded area, which essentially incorporates all of those. The last administration called it strike force areas, right? They're primarily rural, and they are places in which you have persistent poverty, grinding generational lack of income. So whether or not it is a specific geographic several blocks that might or might not be a colonia would not be a factor. Is it in a region where the need is high, where the capacity, we can build the capacity and support a business that can be resilient, can survive, can create jobs, and can serve a community. So I'd encourage you to think of it in a broader way.
okay.
And I think that's particularly that has been the tension that we've had as we work with Colonia Challenges. Because when you keep the definition broad, let's just give money to the Rio Grande Valley because you have colonias. And that means that if you send money to the Rio Grande Valley, therefore you're helping everybody in the colonias. But that's a lie, because when you have Colonia residents who do not have trash pickup, I don't have trash pickup in my home. When you have Colonia residents who have to deal with a different infrastructure within the same region, if you're telling me you're putting new jobs that are accessible in what is already city jurisdiction within the county, that's not really helping the colonias. And I think that has been the tension when we work with the Texas Water Development Board. In Texas, they are the ones, through the Secretary of State, who designate the Colonia maps. And we actually work with the county to identify the new Colonia maps, and we do GIS overlay to identify exactly where Lupe members and Colonia residents are at. And under the Texas Water Development Board, Cimarron is considered a colonia. Some people laughed. And that is the bougie.
For some who don't know what Cimarron is.
For some people don't know that is the most bougie side of town. That is where you have the most amount of mansions, a lot of wealth, and that is South Mission area. When you have Cimarron considered a colonia, and you tell me the federal government is investing money in whatever county there are colonias, but the money is actually not getting to the Colonia residents, I think that's where the disparity is. Because let's think about Mission in McAllen. That's where you have Amazon, where you have all of these foreign trade zone entities and organizations, and there's a lot of wealth. But if you drive 30, 45 minutes north to Alton, north of Mission, that's where you actually get to see the poverty in Hidalgo County. But that's what now most of you are going to see, because you probably came in to the airport in McAllen, drove here, and you're gonna leave, and you're not gonna actually get to experience what Colonias are at. I lived 10 years in McAllen, Texas, before I discovered where Colonias were, and that is until I got to work at Lupe. And a lot of community members that we work with here, a lot of people who are in the Rio Grande Valley, don't know what a colonia is and what they actually look like. And so you have a third world community living in a first world country. And when the federal government is saying, well, we're not actually identifying the geography of the colonias, we're just investing money, whatever county there is colonias, we do a disservice to Colonia residents who actually need the most resources.
Yeah.
Which is what you told me last year.
Yeah. That was a recap from last year. That's right.
That's
Yeah.
right.
I'm
And fair enough. And I think I totally understand that and am sympathetic. And I think that what will be different here is it's not, because you're right, the geographic distinctions that exist now are not legitimate. But decisions about the work, first of all, are not being made outside of here. Your center is a key partner on this work. One of members of the audience is going to be our USDA staff in the work and lives, I'm sorry, well, yeah, you are going to be AMS, so that we can fairly say that. Our guy who's partnering here and lives here. So, first of all, it's guided by local knowledge. And the second thing is decisions will be made not on where you live, but what kind of producer are you? Are you small? Are you under-resourced? Have you historically not been served? So there's this more encompassing, integrated approach to identifying the work in each project. So we're the federal government, and we will definitely be imperfect, but the intention is by partnering with trusted organizations that have legitimacy and are embedded in the community, we'll do it better than perhaps we have in the past. And then I'll probably be back next year and you'll be yelling at me again.
I mean, I think you mentioned this last year, Kate. The goal of this program, and actually a lot of the work that's being done by the USDA, is actually to try and give resources to those who need it most, right? A lot of that requires some good faith effort. A lot of it requires transparency. Right? And I'm curious, from those who are on the business end of this, what levels of transparency are you providing so that we, as people who work and live around in colonias, both know how to access that money and know where that money goes? I'm just curious if you guys have any comment on that. Maybe we'll start with you, Sue.
Well, again, the Eastern Texas portion of the Delta RFBC is really still in development, and I'm happy to share kind of what we're thinking. You know, we're talking about transforming the food system, right? No, not a heavy lift at all, right, for any of us. But the thing is that I think most of us know, those of us who've done social justice work, solutions come from communities. Solutions come from families. They come from school teachers. They come from faith-based folks and organizations. They come from individuals and small groups. And so the approach that we're looking at with the grant making, these small business builder grants that may be under $5,000, you know, just to sort of start and see. We're wanting to start in a small number of counties and try and issue a kind of a request for proposals for solutions. Our job is to say that North Star very clearly. We are interested in investing all of our money, our public money, into your farm or food business to create a robust supply chain that is aligned with these values in its business practices. And we're willing to help coach you on design of a project. Is it 3 farmers along one road that want to get together to sell to the local convenience store that has agreed to devote a shelf to your food? Is it a garden at the local church? Is it a seed library at the library? Is it a vegetable processing facility? You know, what is it? And we have technical assistance experts that we'll bring in to help coach, but I think we'll start with, you know, these small grants. So, I mean, I would love to see, right, wild ideas, because hello, what we've been doing isn't working, right? I mean, anybody think it's working? Just let me know. I'll be here after. But you know, we need some fresh ideas, and I think those fresh ideas come from just reminding ourselves that solutions come from the communities. And so our approach is really put that out there. Of course there will be measurement, and of course we all want accountability. And I think the answer in transparency is transparency breeds accountability, I believe. And so I think for the folks who get these business builder grants, that everyone will know who they are, how much money they got, what they said will be different after they spend the money. What will be different? And then the mutual accountability happens. So that's, I think, you know, trust the people, be clear about the North Star, be crystal clear, and provide the technical assistance to help design these projects in a way that they're going to meet the needs defined by the community.
I want to +1 on the coaching and technical assistance. When it comes to transparency and accessibility, that's been a really major part of the discussions that we've been having, and making sure that these underserved or underutilized small businesses that have largely not had an opportunity to take part in the greater food system because of the way that it's set up to support big ag. That's really something that we're focusing on with our outreach, coaching folks through the process of applying. That it's not an easy application. It's very intense, the amount of information for the business builder sub-awards, and so that's been really important for our center to make sure that people don't, or potential applicants aren't, I guess, automatically taking themselves out of the opportunity because they don't have the grant writing skills, things of that nature, to be able to take part. So really looking forward to being that guide through the process from start to finish.
Let me ask you guys, because some of you guys went on a field trip. Tanya, we went to a Proyecto de Desarrollo Humano yesterday in Peñitas. And for some of people, even some local folks, they had never interacted with folks in a colonia. Even the Colonia folks called it a subdivision. They didn't call it Colonia. They were like, well, we're a subdivision. The name, you know, is this. Now, those farmers that you met, those entrepreneurs that you met, they want in. They want to help you do your job, right? How can they, just for those who are listening especially, how can they get in? If you can just, either of you two, like looking at through the lens of someone who has the resources and holds it and are itching to give it away, I mean, that being part of your job. Tell us, how do they walk through to get that money?
We're anticipating multiple different entry methods of entry. We're going to be holding listening sessions throughout our project footprint. We have an intake form if people have access to technology and can sign up for our newsletter. Different events that we'll be invited to. I'm sure we'll meet people at the farmers market or at a community event. Recruitment is going to be a big piece also from the get-go with our business case managers. One of the first things that they'll be doing is identifying potential clients or small businesses. I hope that it's there'll be a lot of different access points. We're going to be assigning folks, extension agents and coordinators throughout throughout the state, so that if El Paso is too far, there's somebody in their community locally that they can get information from, get coached through the process, and eventually, hopefully, obtain a Business Builder Award.
Perfect. Thank you. Well, I'm going to take one more question. I'm going to give one more question, and then I want to see if the audience has any questions for our panel of experts. I'm gonna go back to Tanya. Remember, I always saving the best for last, right? So, Tanya, I want to just ask you one final question before we ask the audience for questions. So, on behalf of the communities that you work with, right, what would you recommend that Sue and Valerie do and tell their own teams to better execute the goals of their programs so that it helps those who need it most?
I think that we already in the Colonias have a lot of entrepreneurs. I stopped carrying around cash at the office because I'm gaining a lot of pounds. They come and they sell you fruit and aguas frescas, and they sell you the lunch for the day. And so they have an entrepreneur spirit already. And I think we need to stop thinking about food access as just fruits and vegetables, but everything that they're making with their hands. They're baking, they're cooking meals, they're going to the construction sites and selling food daily there. I think we need to start thinking about Colonia residents as entrepreneurs and how are we coaching them? What are the opportunities that you have for them to formalize their own businesses? What are the opportunities that we have to talk to them about marketing their businesses? What is it like to stop using WhatsApp and Venmo and PayPal and actually do a credit card access point on their phones that is accessible? And how do we teach them to file their taxes so that they don't get in trouble and they do it as a business entity? How are we thinking beyond just growers? And we're thinking as a collective of, because honestly, I don't know many Colonia residents who are growers. Many growers are in the unincorporated areas, but they're not particularly part of the fabric of the Colonia residents. Some of them are, the smaller ones are. And so I think we need to think very holistically about how we access fruits and vegetables. And then honestly, we need to organize, because I would love to see Walmart and H-E-B in the Colonias. And we need to organize to ensure that Colonia residents don't have to drive miles and miles to get accessible access to fruits and vegetables and just simply the grocery store. Those are the things that we need to continue working. Our team is here. Joaquin and our Lupa team, and today we had about 30 community members with us who organize in their colonias, and they use a house meeting model taught to us by Dolores Huerta and Cesar Chavez, who every single day are in the neighborhoods knocking on doors, sitting under a tree, not only identifying how to get drainage into their neighborhood, how to have more affordable and accessible homes, but actually how to learn about their skill set so they can go talk to the members of a government, to the county commissioners, have a meeting with their congressman, how to create a bill so they can have trash pickup in the colonias. And many of the times, they're just trying to take food to the table and make ends meet. They're taking time to improve the quality of life in their own neighborhoods, but they're doing it in an entrepreneurial spirit. And how is the USDA, and through the efforts that you have, how are we nurturing those spirits? How are we partnering with nonprofits like Lupe and Arise, that we already have the bulk of community members coming to us, and that we could open our doors and facilitate those discussions? If the community already trusts Lupe and Arise and other entities to be that first point of entry, let's collaborate and sit together so that we don't have to see each other again next year, but we can actually continue working throughout the year and implementing efforts that are going to improve the quality of life of our Colonia residents, not just growers, but actually Colonia residents who are living there, who go to school, the children who go to the high schools, the children that are going to go to Head Start. And so those are the things that when we think about Colonia residents, we just don't think about the individual who lives in a home that is falling apart. We think about an individual that is working hard, an individual that is investing on their community, an entrepreneur, community member of this society, somebody that is going out and voting, somebody who cannot go out and vote, they're getting the neighborhoods out to vote. Because that's the only way we're going to be able to change the infrastructural systems that we have that is oppressing them. And they know they're not going to give up, and they know that they're going to continue activating their community and demanding from the members of government to improve the quality of life because they know they deserve that.
Does anybody have a question for the panel?
I got to follow up on that. Okay, I'm Kalia Souza, and I'm here from Michigan State University Center for Regional Food Systems. We're the lead for the Great Lakes Midwest Regional Food Business Center. So I have two questions that I've been thinking on, and what you just said at the end just beautifully transitions into one of those questions, but both of these questions center on intentionality and sustainability. So one, I want to recognize that this is more money than has ever been put into an effort of this kind. And yet, when you divide it up among 12 centers and you measure that against the need, it also isn't enough. So I want to put that out there that kudos and it's not enough. So how are you guys thinking about intentionality in the way that you are distributing these efforts to build into sustainability beyond, this is the second part of the question. This was funded by American Rescue Plan Act funds. This is a grand 5-year experiment. What happens after? So there's even research, practical research out there that says collective impact initiatives, like a whole bunch of organizations, initiatives come together to resolve some kind of wicked issue, that the organizing alone can take 3, 4, 5 years, 8 years before you see measurable impacts, looking at all sorts of initiatives, whether that be housing, food systems, whatever. So then, how are you thinking about what happens beyond the 5 years of funding? In other words, I'm saying, who do you partner with on advocacy to keep this going? Because let's say you're successful in 5 years with getting the things done, and what after, when the funding isn't there?
Thanks for that question. I can give our answer, and it speaks to the entrepreneurs. I mean, I've had the good fortune to be able to start a few businesses for other owners. They weren't my businesses, but I had a blast starting them. And it takes risk and it takes capital investment. And here's an opportunity in this grand experiment of food system transformation to find the entrepreneurs, and we've talked about this in the Delta region. Start by finding those entrepreneurs that just need a little leg up. They're just about ready. They're good, and they know what they're doing, and they're practiced. And pump investment into them. Again, our money, our investment. And then they help the ones that need it most, like a comet and the tail. And when we start businesses and encourage people to start businesses and support them, they will find, many of them, not all of them, but many of them will find ways to sustain their business. So that's one way. It's not the complete way, but it's a piece of it. And I think in food systems work, we don't have enough people who have experience with being an entrepreneur. And I think that's a gap in our skill sets in food systems work. And I think that will be very helpful for us to work on filling that gap. And I think that'll take a little time, but we don't have a lot of time. We don't have a lot of time. We have a lot of work to do. So we have to collaborate, and we have to be inventive, and we have to trust.
I cannot speak on behalf of the federal government, but I can tell you what we can do as community members the first thing that you need to go out and do is go vote. We have an administration that is dispersing this millions of dollars for community. It's our job to ensure that it continues to be secure for years to come. And it's also our job to talk to members of Congress and to talk to our representatives on the ground. And when you're talking about advocacy, that's one of the strengths of Lupe and other organizations on the ground, of the United Farm Workers, where's Arturo? Ya se me fue? Acá está Arturo. We do a lot of work with the UFW at the federal level on advocacy, not just on immigration, but also on ensuring that we have fair labor standards for farm workers, especially in the heat. In South Texas, La Unión del Pueblo Entero, we were advocating for regulations that will protect construction workers, which is the vast majority of our community membership. But it's the same issue that is affecting farm workers in California and the rest of the state of Texas. When we don't speak up about the issues that affect our community, we cannot secure that funding for our community. And so I think, how many of you, raise your hand, how many of you have spoken to a member of Congress and requested a meeting? Not even half the room. And so that is the part that we have to do. We need to be calling them. We need to be asking them. We need to make our voice heard. But the number one place where you make that voice heard is through the power of your vote. You cannot vote because you don't have the U.S. citizenship. Don't you worry. You can get your mom, your dad, your in-laws, your sugar daddy, your sugar mama, everybody out to vote. That's something you can do.
Kate, did you want to say something in regards? Okay, well, I mean, we might have time for one more question. Or one from that guy right there.
This is mostly for you. I really want to recognize what you said about entrepreneurship in the Colonias. Certainly down here in South Texas in the Valley, it's the most entrepreneurial areas, right? Are these communities, and it's out of people's houses, and sometimes it's formalized and sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's under cottage food law, sometimes it's not, but it's happening. And so the ability of the local regional food business center to tap into that, not try to create something out of whole cloth, but really tap into what's already happening is going to be really important. And also building on what you said about, and Alex as well, about the Colonia maps and about like where will the priorities be? And is it based on a map? Which map is it? Where are those boundaries drawn? I was wondering, for you all, for Lupe, for Arise, not to say everything's map-based, but is there something that we can collaborate on to make sure that, again, I mean, we know not to be working completely in like Cimarron, but we also want to make sure that we're focusing where the opportunity is, where people need those funds, and where we can already sort of build on work that is happening in the community with these really, really important community partners.
Absolutely. Thank you for that question. At Lupe, we usually are around 50 different community neighborhoods at a time. I don't know how many Arise is working on at a time, but what we do know is that once we finish infrastructural work in that neighborhood, we move on to the next set of colonias. Any organizer at any given time has anywhere between 5 to 15 colonias, depending on the seniority of the organizer. That really represents about 1,000 or so community members that are actively at all points on different issues: drainage, lighting, infrastructure, education, healthcare, access to internet. I am not an expert on Colonia resident. Colonia residents are experts on that matter because they are the ones who get to live there. I just started living there a couple years ago, and all of a sudden I realized a lot of the issues we have because I don't have trash pickup. Have I said that? I don't have trash pickup. And those are some of the things that we work very closely with the county. The first thing that we do is we're every single county commissioner's court meeting in both Cameron County and Hidalgo County, and we're making our way on Starr County. And we do that because we want to make sure that they listen to us when we ask for requests. And we invite them, if they they do streetlights in our colonia, we invite the county commissioner and celebrate with them. But we have no issues going and protesting them at commissioner's court if it's been 5 years and they still haven't installed colonia lights in any one given colonia. We have that give and take relationship with them. And they do have maps. They do have colonia maps, and we work with them. And usually, for example, with the access to connectivity, they gave us the GIS maps. We overlaid our colonias. We overlay where we were working at because our priority was the Lupe Colonias. And so we needed to know where the gaps were, and that's how we're working with the county hand in hand. I think the first thing that you need to do is approach organizations like Lupe and Arise, entities who are really working in the colonias and not by the colonias. And I think that's a very interesting distinction. Because when you are working with colonia residents in and out, we know mileage in Hidalgo County is expensive. Our organizers need to drive about an hour to go to Pueblo de Palmas, north of Edinburgh, because there's about 20 Pueblo de Palmas sections, Maina? Yeah. There's many colonias. There's over 1,000 colonias in Hidalgo County. When we work with the Texas Water Development Board to identify the colonias, we literally had to go colonia by colonia, identifying and making sure that they were actually a colonia designation. Because what the Texas Water Development did is they flew over Hidalgo County, and then they said like, here's a colonia, here's a colonia, here's a colonia. But they didn't actually go into the ground. So we deploy colonia residents all over Hidalgo County to actually mark the areas that colonias were at, and then we challenge those maps back to the state. And when you have that relationship with the county, with organizations, that's how community change happens. One of the most beautiful relationships that we've had, it was Lupe, it was Arise, it was CDCB out of Bronzeville, BC Workshop. They're an architectural firm. They're in Houston, but they also have an office in Bronzeville. And they will send their architects to the colonias, and they will say, where does it flood? Because the county wants to put the water drain on this side of the colonia. Well, no, that's not where it floods, because the water retains on that side of the colonia. So we took the maps, and we said, Commissioner's Court, hear us out. This is what the evidence says. If you're going to invest in drainage infrastructure in X colonia, you should put the water drain there and not over here. And that is the power of community organizing, and that is the power of collaboration.
Thank you.
We have 5 minutes. So one last question. We've got one right there.
So my name is Memo with Farmshare Austin in Austin. I don't know how familiar you are with the term positive deviance, but like taking community solutions and not coming up with one as an organization, which I think Lupe does a very good job about doing. I feel like is like the core of y'all's mission. But for everyone else, like how do you practice positive deviance, or like coming, like listening to your communities and hear their solutions, like your listening sessions, or specifically for the organizations that you work for?
Boots on the ground, going to where the people are, as opposed to expecting them to come to you, has, in my experience at least, been led to a lot more meaningful input and information. Relationship building, it takes time, and letting people, holding space for people, especially within this industry and within the largely neglected communities that we're responsible for. It's traumatic. A lot of the things that they've been through, whether they're in these other underserved, overlooked communities, or if also in food production and all of that. Yeah, just taking the time to really listen to people and holding space for them.
I didn't exactly hear the complete question. Sorry. How do we? Okay. So I'll speak from my past experience because this is a little bit different. I mean, it's a part of our mission and our values to serve historically underserved farms and food businesses. So if we do outreach through what we'll call traditional channels, who do you think is going to show up? Right? And so we have to find across our geographic area the trusted organizations, many of whom we already know, but we don't know all of them. I mean, one advantage you have in the Colonias, just in my outside opinion, is you have Lupe. They know. They can connect you. Across the Brazos Valley in eastern Texas, we don't necessarily have that level of organizing. We'll find people, but our outreach will be very targeted through the groups that we already know and through existing organizations on the ground. And then it could be each one tell one, right? And then the first round of these folks who receive these business builder grants, we have to make sure we have an equitable distribution of resources. That's a part of our job and our commitment. So how are we going to do that? And we have to be able to adapt it as we go. So this first group of grantees perhaps can become a cohort to do the outreach for the second group. Perhaps. So I think, like attracts like. And that means that we better, first impressions count. Start off on the right foot with the right group.
So on behalf of UTRGV, we put on events like this to get everyone on at the table, to make sure that we have those who aren't often invited to share their expertise with us. I think for us, as you mentioned, who asked the question, a big part of it's listening, right? And I know sometimes it's hard to get some folks to come as just listeners, right? I mean, they want to speak, and so I think it's great for those who are in the audience who are listening, and now we're having a meaningful dialogue, because it just starts with, first of all, valuing and listening, right? Like, for example, just earlier we had a listening session. The USDA was willing to have lunch and eat and then listen to our Spanish-speaking community. And you also have to understand that value of language, that value of culture, that's part of it, right? So one of the things that we do, for example, at the Center for Sustainable Agriculture and Rural Advancement, is when we have a Beginning Farmers and Ranchers program, we hire a farmer to run the program. We hire a rancher to fund the program. That way, they have the language, they understand the culture, and that that communication, that dialogue is really important. What I would love to see from some of these programs is you consider bringing on board, and I think you have already, some folks who live and work in colonias. Then they can come and they some of them are already skilled promotoras. Some of them might also be entrepreneurs, and then having that common language of Spanish, the culture of Colonia, and they have that cultural wealth, right? Now, sometimes, however, it's also incumbent on organizations like ours to help people also understand the culture of an organization, right? And I mean, even Colonia-based organizations have a culture around it, and we also have some in addition to listening, we have a responsibility to educate, right? And one of the things that we did recently, you might have saw that trailer parked out front of the hotel. So we got a grant, we got a donation for the trailer, and we got a grant to retrofit it because we realized that we can't just ask people to come to us, you know? So all of a sudden, we want to remove that barrier, and we're going to bring our intellectual capital, which is all we have to offer. We bring it into the Colonia, and we share that intellectual capital with them, right? And I think that's part of that listening and sharing is part of how, it has to be at the foundation of how we do community engagement. And then that way we all belong, right? We're all part of the conversation. So that said, I want to just thank our amazing panel here for your contributions and your expertise. Thank you. I also want to thank all of you guys who've stuck to the very end of the day. You know, we're fighting through yawns. Drank a lot of coffee. I mean, it's been a very stimulating day as well. So I think we're tired even beyond the just being here for the day. But I hope that, you know, it also motivates continue this dialogue, right? And I'm hoping that we don't wait a year before you reach out to Tanya and her team, and to add, you know, to leverage their expertise and wealth. And I hope it's not more than a year until we see all of you guys again. And in fact, we're hoping just that you guys are here tomorrow, right? And so we have another full day. We have another full day of stimulating dialogues. Tomorrow we have an art exhibit of students. There was about 25 students who submitted a photo voice about a photo and a caption of that photo about how they envision their food system to look like. These are all college students from the University of Texas, Rio Grande Valley, who are taking a class in sustainable agriculture. We also invite you to go down to Cine El Rey today, just after here, for a movie called Common Ground. We have free popcorn and drinks. There is a cash bar, but I think it's a movie that we've bought the rights to, the Common Ground, to show. We paid to be able to show it, so that you guys don't have to. And then also we have one of the protagonists in the film, Ray Archuleta, who's known as kind of a pioneer of regenerative agriculture. He's going to be at the film to also have a small dialogue. So if you're not yet full of this information, please, you can go to the movie and continue that. We're going to start back up tomorrow at 10 o'clock here in this room. And then we'll have lunch again. And then we will, and over lunch, we're going to enjoy the photo voice. And then tomorrow, we're actually going to share with you guys our final, our draft of what we call our Rio Grande Valley vision for a fair food system. Now, as I mentioned to you earlier, there has been nearly 30, 35, 40 over the last 18 months who have come in and participated in monthly conversations about how we want to see our food system. We've had folks from Lupe, we've had young students come, we've had city officials come, farmers, pastors. Those folks that you saw up here have been part of that conversation about what we want our food system here in the Rio Grande Valley to look like. And we're not just talking about farming. We're talking about farm workers. We're talking about food distribution. We're talking about youth engagement. And so we want you to hear from our community members who've participated in that dialogue. We also have copies of this food vision that we have to share with you guys, more as an invitation to continue to modify the food vision and contribute to the voices that put it together. And so for that, thank you so much for attending the Food Summit. We'll see you all at the movie tonight at 6.